This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jasperson.
I want to welcome you to a special edition of Real Talk as Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith joins us one-on-one to recap the spring session at the Alberta Legislature. Your elected politicians in Alberta will be those that don't live in Edmonton, obviously heading back to their hometowns, doing their own thing. Not that they're going to take the next couple of months off, but you're not going to hear a lot out of the Alberta Legislature. You're not going to hear a lot about lawmaking. This is when the politicians will go do the Calgary Stampede circuit. They'll go check in with their own constituents. Their staffers will probably catch up on emails, but this is a good opportunity for us to get a sense of where the Premier believes that she was fulfilling her mandate, as politicians like to put it, where she kept her promises, and maybe some of the business that was left undone. Plus, we're going to take a look at some of the subjects that obviously have been front of mind for you, no doubt. Everybody paying attention to that water main breakdown in Calgary. How crazy was that, Johnny?
Yeah,
talking to my family and friends down there. They're talking like this pipe that they had problems with. It's like a 6-foot pipe, to give you a sense of how big this is. They're asking the entire city to kind of, they had boil water advisories in some neighborhoods. They're asking everybody to cut back on their water usage. Barb's going back and forth between the mayor of Calgary and our guest today, the Premier. So we'll ask her about that. We've been hearing a lot about the infrastructure deficit. Want to talk about the social studies curriculum and a ton of other stuff. Plus a special edition of Real Talk, if you caught it, on June 11th. That was yesterday's episode on phones in schools. Ontario and Quebec are making strides on that. What's Alberta's plan, and could it be in place by the fall? This has been resonating with you. A ton of emails we've received to talk@ryanjesperson.com. We know that technology in classrooms, we know that distraction is front of mind for parents, for teachers, for lunchtime supervisors. We heard from one when we were talking about some of this habit in a lot of these schools, including my son's school. At lunchtime, they put the kids in a room. They turn on a show. They put on a show,
distract,
and they prohibit the kids from talking. And everybody's going, "What kind of BS is that?" So we heard from a lunchtime supervisor. I'm going to get to their email today. Plus, we'll let you know this is going to be a bit of a shorter episode of Real Talk, a bit shorter than what we're used to, because we've got something big going on today
let you know
in
why.
the Relay studio, and we'll be talking to you about that after we talk to Premier Danielle Smith. This episode is made possible by Alberta's top real estate school. You'll find them online at relo.ca. That's RELO.ca, where better real estate training starts. If you're looking around, you're seeing what's happening in the real estate market, and you're seeing people make good livings working there, and you think you might be a fit, the best place to start is at Relo. They've got expert instructors. They're going to help you get ready for your exam, get your license, and then the supports continue as you start your own business with unlimited earning potential. Make sure you use the promo code Ryan100. That's all one word, Ryan100 at relo.ca. That'll knock $100 off the Alberta commercial and the Alberta residential real estate bundles. That's Ryan100 when you get started at relo.ca. Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith joining us on this episode of Real Talk. Welcome to the show, Premier. Thanks for making yourself available.
Hi, Ryan. Nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, you as well. Big mess down in Calgary with that water main break. Obviously, I think people take things like water or the availability of water for granted until something like this happens. You and the mayor have kind of been going back and forth in the media. She says that the province has allowed infrastructure to crumble. You say, well, Calgary never asked us for money to fix their water infrastructure. But how has this been landing with you moving forward? How has this crisis situation impacted you as the Premier?
Well, I talked to the mayor and I said, look, let's put aside any discussion of whatever funding shortfalls you may have and get through the immediate crisis. And she's done that. I think, in fact, the city of Calgary has a very sophisticated water department. Remember, they provide services to multiple municipalities in the surrounding area. They pay for the operation of the water infrastructure and the repair of it through the water bill. So if you pull out your water bill in Calgary or your NMAX bill in Calgary, you'll see that there's a line for water and wastewater. So it is a fully funded utility. I don't know that they would ever have injections of taxpayer money that goes into that. So I think mingling those two issues was maybe probably not the right thing to do at that time, but she hasn't since. And I see that they've done quite a good job of explaining to Calgarians why this particular water main has caused so much disruption. The issue they were facing initially was that there was 650 million liters of water being used in the day, and when that pipe went down, they only had the capacity to produce 520 million liters of fresh water. So if they kept on drawing at that rate, they'd draw down the reservoirs. That's part of the reason why they issued the alert saying, whoa, if you can stop showering and bathing and doing your dishes, you should. And I think over the course of the days, they helped to explain that a little bit better. People know that they still have a few more days until the repair is complete and the epoxy is dry before it gets underway and back to normal. So I think that they've done quite a good job of in recent days of explaining that to Calgarians in the surrounding area.
We check in with Alberta municipalities typically quarterly, and they've been sounding the alarm for a long time about Alberta's infrastructure deficit. They've pegged it at $30 billion, and I know that it's obviously on your radar. This, to me, that was the first thing I thought of when I saw this. I mean, I don't obviously know the cause. I don't know that anybody knows the cause right now of the breakdown, but what we do know is that, dozens, even hundreds of Alberta's municipalities are saying that this could happen everywhere, and they're not just talking about water mains. They're talking about sewer lines. They're talking about bridges. Obviously, this has to be of concern for you. Meantime, the funding relationship has changed dramatically, and not just under you as Premier, but under successive governments. What might you adjust moving forward with this as a wake-up call in the context of funding for infrastructure improvements?
One of the things I've told the municipalities is that we do take out an education portion of the property tax on property tax bills. It's about $2.7 billion. And I've told them that we will invest in infrastructure in our towns and rural municipalities to at least that extent. And we have a certain portion that gets funded back to them directly with no strings attached so they can decide what their priorities are. But then we also have a bunch of specialty programs that we do one-offs. That's how we fund LRT in Calgary and Edmonton. It's how we're funding the Deerfoot upgrades in Calgary. It's how we also have funding for a Water for Life program to assist with some of that water infrastructure. So those are the kind of things that we're going to have to talk with the municipalities about whether they want more strings attached matching funding for big projects or whether they want fewer of those so that they can have a plan with long-term revenue streams to take care of their own needs. But I think water infrastructure is quite different because I think in most municipalities it is funded as a utility. So ratepayers pay for that. And I think that there's going to have to be a lot of work that the municipalities do in assessing the strength of their infrastructure, whether there's cracks, whether there's leaks, and what they can do to develop a program to repair that. So we'll be looking at that. I've already asked my Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors, Devin Dreeshen, that this water infrastructure falls under his department to see what we can do to get a handle on where the shortfalls might be. We already do also have a bridge replacement program for very much the same reason. We've got hundreds and hundreds, thousands of kilometers of roads that have been built that all need to have various stages of maintenance over time. So it's a big job, but it's one of the most important jobs government does is maintain infrastructure.
I know you well enough, and I know that you've always believed in autonomy of municipal governments and have bristled in past at the thought of the province meddling in municipal governments in so many ways as you've bristled at thoughts of the feds meddling with provincial governance. When you start talking about things like strings attached, doesn't that kind of run counter to the way that you're wired?
It's funny because I campaign saying, and I've thought this for some time, that we should slowly be vacating the education portion of the property tax and leaving that with the municipality so that they can take care of their own needs. But I got unexpected pushback on that. And I got pushback on that because municipalities, some of them, like to be able to get a big lump sum to pay for projects rather than have to pay for them over time. And so this is the hybrid that we've come up with, is that there's a portion that will be sent to the cities, and it's about $722 million. And then there's a portion that we will fund the big projects with. And there's another reason to do that as well, is sometimes that's the way to leverage federal dollars, that the federal government relies on us to put up money for them to match it. And so that's part of the other reason why we've been able to have some success in getting big projects funded. So it's a bit of an education for me. I thought everybody would enthusiastically embrace the idea of keeping the education tax, and quite frankly, they haven't. So that's part of the reason why we've had to adjust a little bit. But I still think it's vitally important that we do what we can to not only match what the municipalities are doing, but then also make sure that we're getting our equal per capita share from the federal government.
I was intrigued by a tweet that you sent over the past couple of days, talking about the feds, talking about newcomers to Alberta. Obviously, anybody that listens to this show, anybody that listens to you knows that Alberta is expecting bullish population growth over the next few decades. You say if the feds want us to be able to make sure that newcomers are being matched to jobs available in our economies, they've got to give us more latitude to do that. You say we want to keep the doors open in Alberta. We want to make sure we're properly supporting the people coming to our province. It's kind of funny, actually. You talk to people about this Alberta is Calling campaign. I talked to mayors and reeves about it. They're actually lamenting the success of it. Like it's been too successful. Like they're having a hard time keeping up. What kind of a message does it send, do you think, to the rest of Canada? I mean, is Alberta even ready for this population growth that's happening?
I don't know if you're ever ready for the kind of population growth we've had. I think it took everyone by surprise that so many people chose to move to Alberta. Over 200,000 people came to Alberta in 2023. But my view is that I would rather manage the pressures that come from growth than manage the pressures that come from decline. When you look at what happened 13 quarters about migration, we were dealing with shortfalls. We racked up $80 billion worth of debt, I think almost $100 billion worth of debt. We weren't able to properly support the services that we did have. So I don't want to return to that. I would rather us figure out a way to keep up and manage the growth than the alternative. But the federal government plays a role in that. We have concurrent responsibility over immigration under Section 95. And unfortunately, as in every government program, they don't fund us on an equal per capita share. If we got the same, sorry, Brian, if we got the same program that Quebec did, remember, this is particularly for those who are seeking asylum. Now, Quebec does have more than we do. They've got 65,000 that came in 2023. We had 6,000, to give you an idea. But that would mean $75 million, which would be significant because the federal government currently funds all of our immigration programs to the tune of $141 million. So getting 50% more dollars, we'd be able to do a lot more good. We also received well more than we expected of Ukrainian evacuees. We got, I believe we're up to 70,000 of Ukrainian evacuees who've chosen Alberta home, which is more than 20% who've come here. That causes additional pressure too. So what we ask from the federal government is to just, if they're going to create a program, don't make a Quebec specific program. Make a program if it's tailored to Quebec, and then you say, okay, well, this is what we're doing for Quebec, so we'll do the same for everyone else. They would avoid some of the tensions that they're creating in Confederation. You saw that the Premier David Eby was the one who was the most passionate and angry about this, and he's an NDP. He sees BC being treated unfairly as well, and they could avoid this if they just were more thoughtful about how they unroll these programs.
Deputy Prime Minister, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says that this federal carbon capture tax credit is almost in place. I don't know where it is exactly. I think it needs to go through the Senate, but it's basically almost law. So she says that she wants to see shovels in the ground. I remember, 6 weeks ago, maybe less, we were talking on this show about this Genesee carbon capture plan shelved by Capital Power, that $2.5 billion project. Obviously, I think Pathways Alliance is the big one. We've been talking about it on this show. Are you still optimistic when it comes to carbon capture here? How did that Genesee news land with you in the context of the bigger picture here?
Well, it was disappointing, but I look at it as being paused as opposed to shelved. There's I think a couple of things that the industry was waiting for. They were waiting for this ITC to pass. I was just meeting with a number of companies that are investing in carbon capture yesterday because Calgary is having a global energy show. In fact, the BMO Center just opened. It's going to be one of the premier places to do conventions. They have 30,000 people who are in Calgary for that global energy show. But the folks who are in the carbon capture space, they've been waiting for this ITC, and they commented about how fast we moved on ours. We started 2 years after the feds, and we put it in our budget implementation plan. So we're giving a 12% rebate on capital costs for those projects, and that is meant to tie in with the federal plan. I believe theirs is supposed to be passed before they rise in June, and so I would expect the same thing as Minister Freeland, that I'd like to see some pipe ordered so that we can start seeing some of these projects go. When it comes to the existing with existing facilities. It's a little more complicated to try to tack on a carbon capture project on an existing operating facility. I think that was one of the complications that Capital Power faced. But for new builds, I think it's going to be built into the entire cost and how they create the facility. So I would anticipate that we'll see a few more of those kinds of projects with natural gas power plants as we go ahead.
A few appointments making news to people say agencies, boards, and commissions. In particular, Ryan Hassman, Rajan Sani's former chief of staff and a personal friend of mine, by the way, appointed to the board at the U of A. Brittany Baltimore to the board at MacEwan University, and probably most noteworthy, former Premier Alison Redford appointed to the board of Invest Alberta. What was your conversation like with the former premier ahead of this appointment?
Well, I can tell you, people know that we're not personal friends. We were probably some of the fiercest critics of each other when we were both in politics together. And one of the things that struck me when we did have our meeting is the work that she's done around the world. She hasn't been able to work in Alberta, which I think is a real shame for somebody who served our province in the capacity as premier. So she's gone around the world and assisted countries in helping to establish oil and gas regulators, most notably in Guyana, which I've been told is going to be one of the future superpowers for oil production. And so I thought that was an interesting world experience to have. And Invest Alberta is an agency that reaches out into the world to try to bring investment here. So it seemed to me like that was the best use of her expertise. And I think she just wants to be able to work in Alberta again. And after 10 years, I believe in second chances. And I think that she deserves a second chance.
She told you that she couldn't find work in Alberta?
I think that's unfortunate. I mean, most premiers, if you look at any of the other premiers, Ed Stelmach, he's the chair of the board of Covenant Health. You look at Dave Hancock, he's a judge. If you look at Jason Kenney, he's on multiple boards, including various academic boards as well as law firms. I'm sure that Ms. Notley is going to have a number of opportunities, and quite frankly, that just didn't happen for Alison Redford, and I do think that's a shame. So I think we want to attract good people into politics. The reward for being in politics shouldn't be you're never able to work in your province again, and you remain ostracized and a social pariah for life. If that's how we treat people, we're not going to have good people run for office.
Yeah, so Brittany Baltimore, for people that don't know, she was closely associated with Jason Kenney and the Kenney government, and obviously Redford, as you put it in your own words, you weren't exactly personal friends. You were actually obviously quite critical of her. That was your job in past. Were these appointments made like intentionally? I mean, you've just said to us you believe in second chances, but did you set out to send a message with these appointments?
I mean, with Ms. Redford, it took me by surprise what she's been doing in the last 10 years. And I thought that it was a really good fit for Invest Alberta, since we're trying to expand the capacity. I mean, keep in mind, Anne McClellan is also on the board of Invest Alberta. So we try to make appointments that are going to allow the agency to achieve its objective. The objective of that particular agency is to try to reach out into the world and get people interested in investing in Alberta. When it comes to, you have to remember how many agencies, boards, and commissions we have. I mean, part of the reason we have that is so that you have arm's length decision making outside of the ministerial day-to-day operations. We've got, I think, about 250 agencies, boards, and commissions. They have 10 to 20 people on each of them. So there are literally somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 appointments that need to be made. So what I do is I rely on my minister to assess the resumes, make sure that it's a good fit. We do a vetting process to make sure that they don't have anything on social media that is going to be controversial, because we don't want these appointments to and we don't want the agencies to be politicized or in the news. We want them to be able to do the good work that the agencies do. So I don't personally know every person who is appointed. There's just way too many appointments for that to happen. But we do try to get a good balance of people from all perspectives.
There's an event coming up in less than a week from when we're talking, June 17th. People can find it on the party's website, unitedconservative.ca, presented in the riding of Calgary-Lougheed, An Injection of Truth, it's called. a town hall working with what they're calling an all-star cast of doctors and scientists, which I'll personally take issue with. But they're basically wanting to see the kids, like they want to see the vaccine program for kids changed. And it's prompted, as I'm sure you've seen, an open letter from the Edmonton zone medical staff. And I'll just read a quick bit from there. Part of this open letter, they say, setting public health policy by recruiting discredited and unlicensed doctors and spokespersons who cater to an anti-science agenda is dangerous. They say the UCP sponsored event is an example of fear-mongering by anti-vax proponents transmitting fringe opinions informed by hearsay and innuendo. They say providing rigorous analysis of evidence and safety and effectiveness of vaccines a better way to serve all Albertans and their children. Why are you allowing this to happen under the UCP banner? This seems like it's like a self-own. It's like you're shooting yourself in the foot kind of a thing.
Well, look, I mean, it's the local MLA and his constituency association is hosting the event. As you know, UCP policy is advisory to government. Government policy is very different. The process we go through in government is we hear from all voices, listen to all stakeholders, and we make the best decisions for the interests of Albertans. And the decisions we made as government is that these vaccines are available to anyone who wants them from the age of 6 months forward, and as are all of the other vaccines. And I think what we're seeing is that with the MMR vaccine and the DTaP vaccine, there's a very high uptake. I believe over 75%, which is very positive because those are very dangerous childhood illnesses. On the COVID vaccine, there's less. It's less than 10%. I see from the stats that we keep on immunization. So parents are looking at the various options for their kids, talking to the doctors, and making the best decision to protect the health of their children. That's what we're allowing. We're allowing parents to be the decision makers here, and we'll make all the vaccines available for those who want them.
Shannon Phillips, obviously opposition MLA, former cabinet minister, resigning, basically talking about, kind of an indictment, delivering an indictment of the state of Alberta politics, talking about the vitriol, the misinformation. Everybody knows the story of her and the Lethbridge Police Service. If they don't, they can look back in our archives a couple of weeks ago. MLA Phillips talked to us about this. Are you concerned about the state of Alberta politics? Do you share her concerns there? And are you concerned that the Alberta's Crown prosecutors are not proceeding with charges like ACERT recommended in that police surveillance scenario?
Look, I think every politician has an expectation that they're not going to be surveilled by police. I was just as alarmed by the allegations and findings against Shannon Phillips as I was against Carrie Diod. So this is not a partisan issue. We've had instances where this has occurred in the past. Now, as you know, this is in the hands of my Justice Minister and Attorney General. So I don't comment on the decision for why the Crown made that choice. But I think that the message has been sent, and I would hope that we don't see these kinds of cases going forward, because it's clearly had a major impact on Shannon Phillips. And we want people, again, to feel comfortable putting their name forward in politics. When it comes to the issue, I guess I think Alberta is a very welcoming and robust place for ideas. I haven't seen the same kind of extremes that we see in other jurisdictions. When we have protests, they tend to be peaceful. We don't tend to see people trashing buildings or setting things on fire, and I think that's a good thing. I think on both sides, the fact that we're able to have a sharing of ideas without causing damage or harm or creating fear, I just think it's a little bit different. I've seen just as many concerns about the Black Bloc aligning with left-wing causes, causing absolute chaos in other jurisdictions. That's not happening here, and I think we should be mindful of what's happening around the world. But I would bring the temperature down a little bit. I think that we actually have a very respectful way of debating issues with each other, either through the legislature or in the public. I know that that's the tone that I try to take. I approach every person with, I might learn something from them. I talk to every person, even those that I disagree with on most things, to try to find some area of common ground. So I can only control how I conduct myself and how our caucus conducts ourselves. But I haven't seen the same kind of concerns that she does. So I'm sorry she feels that way.
Your education minister, Mr. Nicolaitis, rolling out the draft curriculum or Alberta's revamped K-6 social studies curriculum, prompting a comment from the president of the Alberta Teachers Association, Jason Schilling, who says the input of teachers is simply not reflected in this recent draft. He calls the curriculum flawed and says that more time is needed to get it right. What's your response to the president of the ATA and to Alberta's teachers?
Well, we have consulted for literally years on this curriculum, and it's time to implement it. And in fact, we took a lot of feedback and made a lot of changes to the curriculum. The most important that we did is that we had heard that the education that would have the onset of teaching about ancient civilizations in grade 1 was just too early. And I thought that was pretty good feedback. What we were asked to do is align our early grade social studies with what we see across the country, where you first learn about yourself and your family and your community and your province and Canada before you start getting into world history. And that's how we've structured it. We also heard, of course, that that there were some missing pieces when it came to representing the full, diverse, multicultural array that we have in Alberta. I think the Hindu community was concerned that we didn't have them featured as prominently as they would have liked as one of the major world religions, so that was corrected. We heard from the Jewish community and the Muslim communities that they both wanted kids to be sensitized to issues of racism before going into junior high, which is where racism, bullying can manifest. And so we've built some of that into the curriculum. But let's face it, we have a long history going back to the ancient Greeks that kids need to learn if they're going to understand why we have democracy, how England was created, why England and France fought, how Canada was created, why we have the institutions that we have. So it's not we have to teach Indigenous history, multicultural history, and European history together. It's not one or the other. It's all of them. And so that is the feedback that we got, and I think that the minister struck the right balance.
Does it bug you with Alberta's reputation as like one of the economic engines of Canada, one of Canada's most prosperous provinces, that we spend the least per child on education? Like, is that a tough look for you as Premier?
I think one of the things that that happened, we have to remember where we came from. We came from consecutive quarters of decline in the province. We were trying to manage school boards that were losing enrollment. So we created a funding model that would allow for the loss of dollars to step down over time so that they didn't end up finding a massive decline year over year. Plus, during COVID, they actually got more money than they would have under the old funding model, just because a lot of people were educating their kids at home, and the funding model actually allowed them to shore up some of their reserves. We were all taken by surprise by 2023. I think we had anticipated that funding formula that gives 50% the year of the population increase and then 75% and then full increase after 3 years. It works fine for declining enrollment boards. Doesn't work particularly well for boards that have a massive increase in population. This is kind of new territory for us. So we went through our budget cycle. We're consulting with school boards to see what we might do to be able to ease some of that burden. That being said, we are spending $9.3 billion, which is the most we've ever spent on education. And we provide a lot of options for education, whether it's charter homeschooling, private schooling, Catholic schooling, or public schooling. So we do want to make sure that we preserve that diversity, but there are clearly funding pressures that weren't anticipated in 2023 that we now have to start addressing for next school year.
I know you're up against the clock, Premier Soros, so I'll leave it at this. Ontario and Quebec, first in the country to introduce policies around distraction in classrooms, and they're banning, depending on the province, depending on the age of the student, banning the use of cell phones in class. I have to assume that Alberta has something coming, and I would assume that would be in time for the fall. What's your plan? How is this landing with you?
I don't know if we've ever seen a consultation that got so much reaction. 68,000 surveys within the space of a short month. And the minister was able to make a presentation to cabinet on the findings and say, we got to move on this. So he is working on collating all that information and developing the policy and we'll be releasing it, I believe, sometime next week. I don't know what you've heard, but if it's the same thing that we have heard, but there seems to be a lot of support from parents and teachers alike for limiting the use of cell phones on school grounds. Is that sort of the sense that you're getting from your listeners?
Well, so we did a special episode on it yesterday. We talked to that phenom broadcaster Wyatt Sharp in Ontario. I know you know him. He's like coming up on his 15th birthday, I think, grade 9. He's been somewhat critical of Ontario's plan, but also he's not like the average student, right? Like he needs his phone because he's texting Anderson Cooper and Don Lemon. So, he's a little bit different, but I think he supported it generally. We talked to a junior high teacher by the name of Jillian, used to live in Quebec, now lives in Alberta. She supports the idea. Her school in the Edmonton region has its own policy, and that seems to be working for them. She said there was a bit of pushback at the beginning, but not so much now. And then we talked to like an early childhood educator, a gal by the name of Alison, who runs a place called Creation Space. And so she works with kids from, 6 months old to 5. And she's big on nurturing creative perceptiveness and sort of intellectual, brain development in the early stages. And she keeps her own kids and the kids at the facility as far away from tablets and screens as possible. She focused more on the 2D versus 3D. It's better to feel slimy than not feel slimy, to feel what slime feels like, as opposed to hear about it on the iPad. It's better to feel what sand feels like under your fingernails than to read about it or hear about it on an iPad. So that was kind of her take on it. I had a group chat roundtable, which is kind of a fun tradition we have. One of our participants said that at her kid's school, some of the parents were pushing back on the no phones policy. That's anecdotal, obviously, but for the most part, I would just say the majority of people seem to be, unsympathetic to kids that want to have their phones in schools. And I think everybody can see what's happening with adults around them, and recognize that we all could probably do with less time with our noses buried in front of our phones.
Well, I think you've summarized a lot of the feedback that we got. And so I think that's what we're trying to balance is parents need to be able to reach their kids and coordinate for after school activities. Some kids, if they're getting bullied in school, might want to have their phone on them just in case they need to call mom and dad. So we want to be able to try to find a way to address the very serious concerns teachers have about paying attention in class, but also making sure that we're not overly interfering in a parent's ability to reach their child when they need to. So we're threading the needle on this one. I hope we've got it right, but you'll hear a little bit more about it next week when the minister makes his announcement.
Let me sneak 30 seconds more with you because I just have to. And obviously we could talk for an hour and a half. Public auto insurance, it sounds like your team's line on this, or your take on it, is that cost prohibitive to set up a public entity. So what now? Insurance rates for people, premiums are out of control.
It is $3 billion. I just when I think about that cost to capitalize and then having to fire, I think it's 5,000 or 6,000 employees and hire new employees, especially when we've got a labor shortage, it just doesn't seem like a very practical thing to do. So we're looking at how we can create other options, and it is pretty binary. If you hear from the insurance industry, they say, well, you have to limit the ability of people to go to court and sue, put in a schedule of payments for injury, like they do in no-fault systems in places like Saskatchewan. And then you'll hear from the trial lawyers that people are prepared to pay the higher premiums because they want to be fully protected when it comes to an injury. They want to be able to go to court and make sure that a person pays. So those are the two poles that we're looking at. Is there any way to find a middle ground on that? Is there a way for somebody to be able to opt in if they want to a no-fault system so that they can pay lower premiums, knowing that the consequence of that is if they do get injured, then it's going to be a schedule of payments rather than court. That's the kind of thing that we're trying to find a solution on. They do something similar to that in other jurisdictions the opposite way, where they have a no-fault system and you pay a premium to be able to go to court. I think the sense we want to do is we want to preserve people's right to be able to battle things out in a court of law. But for those who think they want to move to a no-fault system, should we create the avenue for that so that they can defray some of their insurance costs? That is the active discussion that we're having right now. And I don't think that we've come to a conclusion on that. There's just not very many easy solutions on this one, unfortunately.
Premier, thanks as always for your time. We'll spend more time talking about healthcare next time our paths cross. I appreciate 100%. This.
Thanks, Ryan.
Okay, yeah, you got it. That's Alberta Premier Danielle Smith on the heels of spring session wrapping at the Alberta Legislature. Let us know what you think about that interview. Talk at ryanjesperson.com. We got a ton of input after our June 11th episode on smartphones in schools.
Tons.
And want to encourage you to keep those coming. We want to hear from parents. We want to hear from elementary school teachers. I'm going to get to this email from a lunchroom supervisor in just a second.
They don't call them lunch ladies anymore.
No. I think of Adam Sandler when I think of that. But yeah, totally. Yeah, it's so different.
Beans,
but
Navy beans.
I was blown away to hear even at my little guy's school that they are prohibited from talking when they're eating their lunch.
How did you find this out?
He
Just,
told
like
us, and I couldn't believe it.
Oh.
And then we checked in on it, and it was like, and then the kids can go outside. And then they can play and talk. So what do you think they do? They don't eat their lunch.
Of course, because they want to get out there.
And if you want to eat your lunch, they sit you down in a room and they just turn on a TV and play a bunch of shows. And it's just like, it's unbelievable. We'll get to some of your comments on what you heard from Premier Smith as well in just a second. But I want to remind you that these episodes simply do not happen without the support of Real Talk partners like our friends at California Closets. If this is the time of year, and for a lot of people it is, you're exiting spring, you're getting into summer, the big priority for you is getting organized. Nobody does it better than California Closets, and it all starts with a free design consultation. That's where you can learn more about their approach to transforming your closets, your storage systems, whether that's your storage room, whether that's your garage, whether that's that second or third bedroom that right now is also your home office, and it's also, well, whatever else. When something needs to go in there, that's where it's going. California Closets can hook you up, and don't forget, all of their work comes with a lifetime guarantee. Book your free consultation today at californiaclosets.ca. Our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy are hiring right now for their offices in Lethbridge, in Kamloops, in Calgary, in Edmonton. They are Canada's fastest growing solar installer, a full service contractor for residential and commercial solar power systems. If you're looking to get solar in your roof, now's the time to do it. Whether it's your barn, your cabin, your house, your office tower, Kubi does it all. You can check out their work and get a free quote online at kubienergy.ca. Our friends at Complete Care Restoration are hard at work right now. Of course, they're still rebuilding communities from the wildfires of 2023. I mean, in some cases, the factor, you can't ignore it. Entire communities get leveled when wildfire happens, when flooding happens. And you know what else happens in that situation? People, their peace of mind is compromised. The team at Complete Care Restoration, this is still a family-owned business. And for more than 25 years, they've been restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind. They're ready to respond 24/7 if disaster strikes. That could be black mold. That could be asbestos. You name it, they handle it at CompleteCareRestoration.ca. And our friends at Friesen Brothers want to remind you, number one, that on the first of every month, groceries are 15% off all purchases of $75 or more. Plus, June is Alberta Pork Month, and Friesen Brothers is proud to support Alberta's pork producers. It's barbecue season, and every single one of Friesen Brothers' 17 stores is giving away a grill. That's right. All you have to do to qualify is sign up for their Smart Shoppers program, and then you will be automatically entered to win with every purchase of Alberta pork. Friesen Brothers is Alberta grown and Alberta owned.
Free grill. Can't beat that, man. Jeez.
Whew. Pretty cool stuff, man.
Yeah.
So, we did something kind of different this week, and we want to thank our audience for checking out the past couple of episodes. We were unavailable to be in studio. We've been working on a couple of things, and as you know, we've had some personal things going on. You can check out our episode on grief a few episodes ago. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I want to thank all of you for your outpouring of support for the show, and for me in particular. It really means a lot. But we tried out a couple of episodes. Love you too, brother. Yeah. We released a couple of episodes, one with Charles Adler on The Other Randy, which is like our favorite political story of the year so far, The Other Randy. And we also released an episode, a special edition episode, kind of like a deep dive into cell phones in schools. Yeah. And we always appreciate when you're in touch with us and in touch to the show. And that's exactly what Big A did. And I'm going to protect the name here.
Sure.
They didn't ask me to, but it just feels like, I don't want to get anybody
Subject
fired
matter,
here.
yeah.
But Big A wrote in and was in particular my comment about my son's school and screen time at lunch and prohibiting students from talking to each other at lunch really landed with Big A, who said, hey, listen, I do lunch supervision. That's my job at an elementary school. And I was shocked at the screen time that they use to control wild classrooms. It seems to be decided class to class by the teacher. So it's a class to class basis by the teacher. But Big A says, as a supervisor, I love seeing kids interact, obviously, even though it can get crazy sometimes. I mean, they're kids, for Pete's sake. And hearing some of the older lunch supervisors, some of them I had when I was at that same school, talk about kids getting too rowdy really irks me. The solution certainly isn't doping them with YouTube. That from Big A. Wow. I thought I loved how they put that.
I love it too. Yeah, I really enjoyed what we did over the last week here, and I want to hear feedback from you. I mean, send us an email. Do you like? We're trying to work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
So do you like having really pertinent episodes, really big ones like the Premier Live and maybe a couple pre-recorded when we can get those other guests in? And we also have some crazy stuff coming up this week too that kind of had us, swerving and adjusting things in the studio. But I want to know how our fans felt about having those episodes go out earlier. That was one of the big things, 7 a.m. So you can listen on the way to work instead of, in your cubicle hiding. We all know you're hiding listening to Real Talk for the first hour at work.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We appreciate everybody that breaks their work policy and is watching Real Talk on YouTube or streaming it live on the Mixler audio app presented by California Closets. I know that some members of our live tuning audience kind of miss the community.
Yeah.
They miss being able to gather in community during that morning, which is a thing. Yeah. And we're so grateful for those of you. But also, just to be frank, sometimes for us, the trade-off is if we can't do it live, the trade-off is either
make sure we have a show,
still have an episode, for our podcast listeners in particular who still have something to listen to on their way home from work or while they're walking the dog. The other choice is no show at all. Yeah. And so, in that circumstance, but we always want to grow. We always want to better understand what the audience is looking for. I love this from Garth, who says, I think I might need to hit Friesen Brothers, pick up a nice pork shoulder for the smoker. Yeah. Garth, that sounds pretty good.
Jillian says, have it pre-recorded, but she wants the commentary. That's something we might look into as well, is just maybe you and me from bed just hopping on our laptops and doing whatever. But we had some big stuff going in the studio, so it was we're kind of testing the waters. I mean, how many other shows? I know there are some, but how many other shows 365 days a year are putting out a show Monday to Friday every week? We're doing this.
Yeah, we are doing it. And we do have an exciting announcement, which we can now make public because it is happening today and tomorrow and the next day. I heard from some people on Twitter who said, well, what was this big announcement that, somebody, because we built up the hype last week. And I said, this arguably is as big as welcoming the Prime Minister to the studio. For us it is. And certainly in the podcasting community and the content creating community. So we're excited to let you know, obviously, with the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup Finals, international media is landing in Alberta's capital city last night and today, and they're going to be here for the next few days. And we're pretty honored and excited to welcome the Spittin Chiclets crew to the Relay studio.
Incredible.
This is a really cool opportunity for us. I like to think it's a cool opportunity for them. And if you're a fan of easily the most popular hockey podcast in the world, there's no doubt about that. I think that you'll be stoked as a friend of Real Talk to know that Chiclets is going to be going live from the Relay studio today. That's Wednesday. Again on Friday, they're going to be recording all of their interviews here, and there will be a special episode of Real Talk featuring
with all the boys,
the stars of Spittin Chiclets, which is going to be a lot of fun for some of you. Some of our Wise Kyle says, I love those boys. Woo! Evans going to Egg says, oh hell yeah. So this is Tracy says, I would rather hear from Spittin Chiclets than Danielle Smith. That's fine as well. There's a lot of people who would rather hear from Danielle Smith than the Chiclets, but that's the beauty of Real Talk. We tell you, we are news, politics, and pop culture. We'll throw in a little bit of sports. The fact of the matter is, nobody has mastered sports podcasting better than, I mean, in particular, the Barstool crew, but what Spittin' Chiclets is doing is amazing, and they are a real phenom, and it's pretty cool for us to be welcoming them here to our studio.
And it's great, let me pat you on the back and us, that they recognize nobody else has mastered live streaming podcasting better than the Relay Studios, where we broadcast Real Talk with Ryan Jasperson every day from the historic Mercer building right downtown in Rogers Place. So they were the first place these guys came.
Yeah.
We're so excited to have them all in studio with us all week.
Yeah.
I know your voice is a little crackly today. Just wait till Friday, Saturday, Ryan, because the playoffs are here. 2 home games. These guys are in town.
Yeah.
They're doing all these interviews here in studio, a round table with us, all their appearances. It's going to be absolute mayhem.
Plus, they heard that we had a freezer full of Pink Whitney. So
we had to stock it.
You know, so they were ready to go there. Before we do go, I wanted to give you a quick heads up. You know, every single week, courtesy of our friends at Tourism Jasper, we have a chance to put basically memory-making opportunities on your radar. It's My Jasper Memories, presented by Tourism Jasper. And this weekend coming up, a pretty big moment for hikers and explorers as the Cavell Road reopens for the season. So this closes for the winter, okay? This is one of Jasper's most iconic landmarks, and this weekend it's going to be most easily accessible because Mount Edith Cavell, as you know, it's the tallest mountain visible. I mean, this is like the Jasper skyline staple, right? The tallest mountain visible from the Jasper town site. It's an amazing place to see a glacier, to check in on those wildflowers, and it's coming into flower season, that's for sure. And then the real high alpine views, which, as you know, are a world of their own. But getting there is half the fun. So from town, you hook onto that old parkway, Highway 93A, which winds along the Athabasca River through the Athabasca Valley. This road was built in the 1930s by hundreds of men that were unemployed because of the Great Depression. I love the history of that, Johnny. And the Cavell Road, which you can learn more if you check out jasper.travel. Just search for Cavell using their search tool. That's what I do to make it easy. It starts at kilometer 13 along the old parkway, and then it's this twisting, turning 14-kilometer route through subalpine forests to the slopes of Mount Edith Cavell, and it's absolutely beautiful. So this Saturday, June 14th, that's back open. Once you're there, you can park. They've got a newly expanded parking lot, and then there's a nice short paved path. I've checked it out myself, which is great for everybody. It makes it nice and accessible. You can see Angel Glacier from there. You've got this mint green lake below, and then the iconic sparkling Mount Edith Peak above. You can also, if you're into hiking, I mean, if that's your thing, for a little extra adventure, you can go for a longer non-paved walk up into an alpine meadow with even more panoramic views. Just a heads up to those dog lovers, your dogs are actually not permitted on the upper trail. Mount Edith Cavell, and I recommend you check out jasper.travel to learn more, named after a heroic war nurse, and it's absolutely and easily the most prominent peak located entirely within Alberta. They can make that boast, right, because Mount Robson shares the BC border, so it's Mount Edith Cavell that gets the bragging rights. And if you want to explore this with a guide, you can find local hikers that'll help you get a deeper appreciation for Mount Edith Cavell or any other Jasper trails. All that information, a great resource available online at jasper.travel. My Jasper Memories is presented every week on Wednesdays, right here on Real Talk, courtesy of our friends at Tourism Jasper. So we're about to go pedal to the metal, and
we've got a big day.
We got to
today.
turn this studio around, and if you're a Spittin' Chiclets fan, you're going to see these brick walls. You're going to be seeing this studio as they go live later today and through the rest of this week. We want to thank you, Real Talkers, for showing up for today's episode and for every episode. Make sure you tell your friends that Danielle Smith was on the show. Let us know what you thought of what she said and what she didn't say. A reminder, we'll have the flamethrower fired up on Saturday if you've got a take with a little extra oomph. Those are the emails to talk@ryanjesperson.com, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Thanks for subscribing to us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter as well. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Thanks for participating in Real Talk.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson. Executive Producer Josh Dunford. Technical Producer John Hicks. General Manager Katie Cook-Chivers. Account Coordinator Lawrence Derlego. Human Resources Lena Shepard. Website Design Mike Johnston. Voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjasperson.com.